companies, because unfortunately the fourth company was in Kyiv and it was not possible to get our equipment there. However, we've transferred those technologies and they have been actually demonstrated to work in those companies, all the photos and evidence, and next door you can see all the display of those technologies. So we're very much into transferring our ideas to industry. And the final equal and most important aspect, equally important aspect of SABYDOMA is aligning our innovation with 2 legal and 2 SSbD workshops, which should be extremely successful, and looking at the different SSbD strategies and comparing and contrasting those with our own. We're not narrow-minded scientists. We like to think very broadly and in a worldly fashion. And finally, developing the SSbD decision framework development with the leadership of one of our partners, Maria Dushinska. She's been doing that very successfully. And I have to acknowledge Anthony Bochon. We hatched this idea, didn't we? 5 years ago, I said philosophy and ethics and law in science is really, really important, and stimulated Anthony Bochon to develop this idea through our project. That's wonderful. And thanks, Anthony, for all his contribution. And I really want to thank everybody else who's worked in the project for their wonderful contributions, and all the technical guys who've been working so hard to get our stakeholder workshop ready today. And also I want to thank you, the audience, a full house. It's wonderful for coming today and coming to this wonderful day of this year and of this project. Okay, thank you. Who's Anthony? I hand over to Anthony. And as I say, Anthony, we hatched the idea of the legal side.
That's right.
I think it was 5 years ago in Grenoble.
Yes, and then the same, yes, after.
Yeah, we really talked a lot about precautionary principle and evidence-based design. We found we had a lot in common because I'd already started a course on that in Leeds, which actually is very successful now. The students love it. Okay.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And I also call here my fellow lawyer colleague, Ignacy, because this is also the adventure of a good project, is that you also need another lawyer from the project. At least we are 2 lawyers in the room, but maybe there are other lawyers in the room, because I know sometimes lawyers they do different things in their career. And it is also the great pleasure, because we have been able, as 2 lawyers surrounded by scientists, to work, and I must say this is really a fantastic journey. I'm doing that at a university where we have a fab lab, so we work also with non-lawyers, and I must say this is probably also all universities tend to work now. But now we are going, because we have a strict agenda and we have a roundtable, which is very important also, because we have a lot of panelists. We are going through quickly a summary of SABYDOMA's legal paper and the findings of the 2 legal workshops on Safe by Design and now SSbD. Yes, okay, yes, thank you. So we start, I know I've been too quick. It's quite, yes. So when we started the project, the concept of Safe by Design was what we call a ULO, an identified legal object. It doesn't fly, but at least it was quite unknown how to qualify the concept of Safe by Design from a legal perspective. And we lawyers, this is our job, to qualify, to give definitions, because legal systems work with words, and it was extremely important. And thank you, Beatrice. The remote control, yes, falls apart. A lot of work these days here. But basically, what we first did was to make a pure textual research, because lawyers, we spent a lot of time previously, that was in libraries, now online libraries, online search engines. And the research was not very conclusive, because there were a few legal texts using the word safety by design, safe by design. But again, there was no explanation why the European legislator chose to use these words. And this is sometimes the frustration, is that we don't have an explanation. And words have just been used without necessarily thinking about the consequences and the potential meaning it could have several years later. Because of course, in the two examples here, the words are used in the first example in communication on future networks and the internet. So something totally unrelated to what safe by design, safety by design is about here in the context we are speaking about. And there was a second occurrence, but that was again in a very particular context. So after a few months of research, we started with the idea that we should organize a first legal workshop. We had initially this idea that we would have 2 workshops on the project. And that was still during the pandemic, so it was an entirely online workshop, and I must say it was quite long. It was more than 6 hours long without almost a break. But we were very fortunate because we brought speakers ranging from Malaysia to California. Because among the speakers, we had Professor Rubinstein, who was the Deputy General Counsel of Microsoft, and professors at New York University. And thanks to these speakers, we had a better understanding of what safe by design could be about or not be about. And among these, I would point out, of course, the review of the literature done by Benjamin Trump and Ignazi, also the presentation by Professor Rubinstein, who presented on privacy by design. And we will come back to this in a few minutes. And we also had already a roundtable, which was quite interesting, of course, in online format, but with a philosopher, Andrew, of course, Maria is here, Igor, Benjamin, and Ignazi. And so we had a very interesting discussion to understand not only the scientific fundamentals of safe by design, but also the impact from a legal perspective and even more deeply an ethical, philosophical perspective. After that workshop, well, the work continued basically. And indeed, yes, we have been thinking how to relate this concept of safe by design and becoming safe and sustainable by design with basic EU law. And of course, the most fundamental principle, which is in the background of safe by design and SSbD, is the precautionary principle. And the precautionary principle is a principle which has sometimes been distorted and been commented by scholars, sometimes in the wrong way, because the precautionary principle does not prevent innovation, contrary to what some scholars say, but on the contrary, it is a principle which is fundamentally scientific in its approach, and it requires a balance of interest, which is really also at the heart of what SSbD is about. We have also to mention the policy and consumer policy, because this is also what is at stake, the protection of the environment and the protection of human health, and also the health of other living beings. Basically, after digging into this, and Ignazi has made a very fantastic contribution in the context of one of the deliverables to really go deeply into the study principles, we moved to a next step in our project, which was the understanding of how could SSbD or SBD be defined. And so we have, of course, been thinking about privacy by design, because this is in the framework of what we call personal data protection. Personal data protection is something that is, at least you have all heard about it, because you all know that the European Union adopted more than 5 years ago, that was 2018, the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, and all your institutions, organizations, companies have to comply with this if they are active in the European Union. And so basically, we have a very fruitful example of how in the mid-90s, in the privacy scholar community, the concept of privacy by design occurred, and there were articles about it, even books about it, and it took more than 25 years to become hard law. By hard law, I mean law that can be enforced and that the addressees of a legal text have to comply with. But this is interesting because, of course, it paves the way for lawyers to think, how can we make SSbD part of the legal system in some ways? It doesn't need to be compulsory. That's a political statement, I think, and that's for the political institutions to decide. But it is important to understand, can we turn it into a legal principle? And the answer was yes, with privacy by design. We have a very good example, and we see how the design principles for privacy have been developed, and the pie chart illustrates that very well. Because of the workshops, we focused also on Asian laws, but speaking about Asian laws is, of course, a very empty word, because there is not an integrated Asian organization comparable to the European Union. And when we speak about US laws, we have to take into account the federal structure of the United States. But of course, we've been looking at regulations in Asia and regulations in the United States, because of course of the weight of these regions in the world and their regulatory role at world scale. After that study, we, of course, not only discovered, but we had the opportunity to work on the recommendation. And of course, we will have one of the panelists who has been really at the heart of this recommendation, and there will be a question for him later this morning. But the recommendation of the 8th of December 2022 from the European Commission on SSbD was, I would say, somehow a game changer, because when we started the project, there was no recommendation. And now we have a recommendation, which is a legal text, not compulsory. It is not enforceable, but it's still a legal text by its very nature. And so, of course, that was extremely interesting for us to think, what could the consequences of that legal text be? And among the challenges we have, of course, is the fact that it's a voluntary scheme, but also we have the problem of access to data. A lot of speakers during these last days have spoken about it. And indeed, I mentioned myself on Tuesday that we have a judgment of the Court of Justice, which came out this Tuesday, precisely about the legal access to harmonized technical standards. And I think that will be a very interesting topic to discuss among scientists, but also with lawyers. We discussed about it yesterday, even at the dinner. And indeed, the question of the state of the art, and this is what we have done in the project, is a literature review to know what the state of the art is about. And also, and that was really at the heart of the second legal workshop, the question of liability. Because when you mention safe by design or safe and sustainable by design, you move the focus on the earliest stage of the development of a material, or let's say even a given technology. And so you raise the question about who is in charge of doing what and when. And therefore, we as lawyers, we always think, if someone is in charge of doing something, well, if you're in charge, you are somehow responsible, and then you turn to the legal word, liable. And that is really a very big question. And to that question, we had an answer thanks to the second legal workshop organized in June last year, just the day, well, on the same day NanoSafe started. And indeed, that was a great event. And there we had also different speakers, among which, of course, we had Hubert Roche, who is present here, who will be on the panel again, because he was not only a speaker, but also a panelist in Grenoble. We understood really better, thanks also to the intervention of Hubert, what was really behind the recommendation and what we can expect in terms of next steps. We had, again, presentations on liability regimes, with an interesting comparison between Asia, European Union, and the United States. Then to Paul Maszkowski, who is one of the top lawyers in the United States on tort law and class action in the chemical sector. We had also a presentation by Leonie Reitz, who wrote at that time a paper on SSbD, really the first legal paper discussing the role of SSbD. She's a professor of environmental law in Rotterdam. And then we have, of course, as usual, a roundtable. And at the end of the roundtable, we came to the conclusion that currently we can really say that SSbD soft law integration will not entail a liability shift. So we have this graph showing that indeed we have to think about the different stakeholders, the inventors, scientists, the manufacturers, and the end users. Today, the legal systems in the European Union put the liability on manufacturers or the importers when the manufacturer is not in the European Union. And we came to the conclusion that no, SSbD is not currently, this is very important, currently is not likely to entail a shift in terms of liability. There is no discussion that the scientist, the inventor, they would become liable if they've not considered enough the impact of SSbD at the design stage. So this is, I think, a very important conclusion, but that's a conclusion solely related to the question of liability. But on that, isn't it, Nancy, we have to look at a bigger picture.
Yeah. Thank you, Anthony. Good morning to everyone. I just want to show you what we have been working about this bigger picture, in the sense that we were told yesterday clearly by the people making the presentation yesterday that we are clearly in a voluntary framework. It's a pre-market framework, and that was very much underlined by the people talking yesterday. That was an interesting starting point. But what we have done in order to show you that bigger picture, basically one of the objectives of our tasks was to investigate whether the European Green Deal gives argument to consider a possible evolution of this kind of soft voluntary instrument to something next to a hard law concept. And if that is possible, if we can find that kind of roadmaps inside the European Green Deal, how that could be operationalized as a hard law instrument. Once you start reading the European Green Deal, you find that it's aimed at radical systemic change, that proposes a new growth model that recognizes the urgent need of technical and social organization innovation, that calls for a systemic approach, and that requests a critical evaluation of every piece of legislation to know if it's aimed to help into the compliance or to reaching the European Green Deal objective or the sustainable development goals in general. That is the aim of the European Green Deal. And what it's interesting to analyze is if the European regulation on nanomaterials, as per today, it's aimed to the compliance with this objective of the European Green Deal. And it's also important to analyze if a soft and voluntary instrument as the SSbD framework also helps as an instrument to reach that objective. Let's say that in general, we find some level of discrepancy there. Such European Green Deal's objectives and requirements, I would say, or we would conclude, the current legislation of nano-regulation in the European community can hardly be said that helps to directly fulfilling the objective of the Sustainable Development Goals. I think that it's a general agreement between lawyers that the actual regulation is based on risk and is not focused on sustainable development goals. That I think is a clear agreement. And between the SSbD framework as a voluntary soft law instrument and its possible needed contribution toward the European Green Deal's objectives and requirements, I think that also we can be a little bit critical on that. Really, a soft law instrument can make changes in that scale are requested by the European Green Deal. But anyhow, what we also discovered is that the European Green Deal offers inspiring building blocks for a possible hard law regulation. And this graphic is what it's trying to show. The European Green Deal emphasized the importance of safe and sustainable innovation, but promotes specifically innovation-friendly environments, that is technology infrastructures. In the form, one of the forms is the Open Innovation Test Beds. That is a specific proposal from the European Green Deal. But also the European Green Deal promotes experimental regulation. The fact or the idea of promoting experimentation in law, the need to find new legal instruments that really help the purpose of the European Green Deal. And that is why when we propose a possible operationalization of the SSbD framework, we were very much focused on experimental regulation as a tool and the Open Innovation Test Bed as an actual tools that can be promoted and updated to reach that objective. Basically, the experimental regulation, most of you probably has heard about the regulatory sandboxes. I will not enter. It's not exactly a regulatory sandbox that we propose, but it's in that field of promoting the experimentation in law, the need of finding ways of pushing regulation toward the objective of the sustainable development work. Obviously, the third pillar is the safety and sustainability framework itself, but also, and for the nano community, it's important to remember that safety by design was our work based before safety and sustainability by design. So I think that the nano community have a lot to share with a broader community, because we were the first developing safety by design. So we have a background that I think it's something that we have to deliver, and that we can deliver, and that we can spread among other, let's say, chemical policies. And especially the safety innovation approach that, as most of you know, the OECD have also taken over. So there are, let's say, two parallel developments that obviously are trying to match together. So at some point they will be together, but all that safety by design work has not been lost at all. The OECD is working very hard on that in nano. So that it's also for us, it's a source of inspiration in our proposal. And finally, the European Green Deal also emphasized very much the need of standardization, the importance of standardization in policy, in chemical policy. So that also gives us the idea and the basic summary of what we have came for is an innovation hub in which we try to promote the coupling of innovation with regulatory innovation. So setting up and based on an open innovation test bed, upgrading the open innovation test bed as now is being developed by the Commission and by the different projects, to upgrade that, including the regulator in the innovation hub, and working together and developing together innovations that instead of the open innovation test bed that today I meant to finish at TRL 6.7. So our idea here is to say, if we integrate from the very beginning the regulator in the innovation hubs, we will have a possibility of setting an ex-ante regulatory process that will help up to TRL 9 the innovator for a fast-track innovation. That's a way of really being able to arrive to the market with innovations in a short time. That is what the European Green Deal is needed. Obviously, that work would be based on the development on SSbD standards, And for sure, here the PARC project has a leading role in that kind of development, in the sense that SSbD standards are needed. And are needed even if we talk of the actual voluntary recommendation. So that work, it's an ongoing work, and the possibility of upgrading that to an experimental regulation in nanomedical devices is just taking over a lot of work that has already been done and is being done at the community level. So it's just an add-on and not just trying to create strange new things. Thank you very much.
And so yes, basically you have more details about what Ignacy spoke exactly about on the slide, so you will be able to check the explanation. And then of course, just to finish what is coming next, because we are at the end of our project, we will have a legal paper which is currently being drafted, and we've decided, because of its length, to publish it first on SSRN, Social Science Research Network, and to have later a shorter version in the law journal, because it has an important legal content. But law journals, of course, have also word limits, and as you know, but more words than usually you have in scientific publications, of course. And then, of course, we have the submission of the reversal 6.10, which reflects what Ignacy just spoke about. So, of course, we still have some ongoing work, and please stay tuned on our social media to know a bit more about our future publications, because we've published quite a lot in this project. And therefore, thank you very much for your attention. And I think now we can move to the roundtable. As simple as that. The only thing that for the roundtable we will need shares, I think. Yes, which is a good way, because for the roundtable discussion, as you know, we have quite a large panel this morning. This is a large roundtable which we organized in the context of a SABYDOMA project, and I will welcome first of all, of course, Andrew Nelson. You all know him. I think I don't have to introduce him again, because Andrew is, I think, outside of the room. I will also welcome Hubert, Dr. Hubert Roche, Principal Administrator at the Joint Research Center. Very well known, I think, to all the audience, but it is again a very great pleasure to have you, Hubert, on the panel for our project, and so please have a seat. I also welcome Professor Victor Puntes, from Applied Nanoparticles, but also Professor at the Catalan Institute of Nanosciences and Nanotechnologies. Thank you very much, Professor, for being here this morning. Of course, partner in the project. With high tables, but I don't think we will have drinks at this time. Also, we welcome Professor Eva Alsabi-Jones, who is also on our SABYDOMA project, Professor at the University of Birmingham, and joining the roundtable. We also welcome Professor Denis Sagianis, President of the Hellenic National Research Foundation, Professor of Aristotle University. Please welcome, Professor. We also welcome Ms. Anne Louis-Devic, who, after being known for activities at Cefic, launched a consultancy based in Valencia, SSbD Consulting. We also welcome Mr. Henrik Egin, Policy Advisor at ChemSec. Thank you very much for being present. And we also welcome a few distinguished panelists from the National Industries Association. First of all, Ms. Blanca Suarez, who is the regulatory director of the association. And last but not least, well known, I think, to most of you, Sean Kelly, currently interim general director of the Nanotechnologies Industry Association. So thank you very much to all of you. You see, we have quite a large panel, but indeed, we have questions and questions to address still this morning. And I will start first. The first question is the question to Andrew, of course. How did SABYDOMA contribute to SSbD during the project runtime, basically? What is, according to you, you have a lot of experience with European projects, what is really what we brought to the scientific community with this project in particular?
Okay, thank you very much. I did look at this in detail for my introduction earlier, but one of our unique and really individualistic contributions to the project was the technological aspect. The project was very much biased on developing SSbD technology on the lines of a control system. And we were the first really to look at SSbD. I mean, to me, it was obvious, but to a lot of other people, when I talked about it 5-6 years ago in Vienna and Grenoble, people looked at me very surprised, but to me it was obvious, and that it was essentially a disruptive idea, and we got it through to develop this wonderful project. So that's one of our really key contributions of SABYDOMA to SSbD. The second one was our direct implicit involvement of exploitation. Exploitation was built into the project through the 4 case studies. We developed the control system technology at the different institutes, Leeds, Fraunhofer, Roland and Cefic, and we developed the idea there in technological terms, and then we transferred it to the companies, and we were in contact with the companies all this time. So the second most important aspect and contribution to SSbD was the implicit exploitation strategy that was built into the project. And of course, this made the reporting so much easier when we were asked about exploitation and how the ideas were going to be accepted by the public and industry. And the third most important and unique side of the project was the involvement of Anthony and Ignacy. I'm sorry I didn't mention you before, Ignacy, but you were equally important. And we had long discussions in the heat in Cyprus, I remember, about more general philosophical ideas. And that was wonderful. And that was the third most important aspect of our project, was the unique involvement of the legal side and the legal ideas that was also a culmination of my ideals from in the last 10 years when I've become very much involved in philosophy and ethics and science. And I do think that the ideas that we developed on the legal side have a very general application, especially during the COVID epidemic, which was an example to me of how important these ideas are in public health management. So I see those as the 3 main contributions of our wonderful project to SSbD.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for your answer. And the second question will be to almost all. And the question is, which progress have you seen in SSbD, not just in theory, but also in the implementation in the last year and a half, and since the European Commission recommendation of SSbD? And maybe I will first give the floor maybe to Anne-Chloé, because you launched a consultancy based on SSbD, so probably you have something in mind about the need of industry.
Yes, exactly. I've been working closely with mainly the chemical industry, but also through the IRIS project with different value chains. So yes, the objective is the implementation. We have this phase of delivering case studies to the Commission this year. So we are committed to deliver those case studies. However, this is a long journey, and that's what we said in that workshop. SSbD is a journey, and 1.5 years after the beginning of the IRIS project, and 2 years after this workshop, I can say that the awareness has increased a lot, but still a long way to go for the implementation. And when we talk to the value chains representatives, the case studies, they don't know how to start. Okay, we have this template that we can use from GRC. So we have description of the case study. Okay, a certain product, for example, if for the automotive value chain, we chose a car seat. And this is the problem. This is an article. This is a multi-component product. And how do you apply SSbD on a multi-component article like this? So we're still struggling, but a lot of progress has been made. We've worked a lot on challenges. What are the different challenges in the value chains? And we are also working now in developing roadmaps, so working on the solutions. And when we mean challenges for the value chains, we mean what are the main safety hotspots, the main sustainability circularity hotspots per value chain. And that has been a very, very useful exercise, but it's still a big challenge to work on implementation.
Thank you, and Chloe, maybe I will turn to Henrik as a policy advisor. You look from a policy angle, how do you see this implementation of the recommendation?
Well, I think a lot of that has happened, and as you said, there's been a lot of case studies, and it seems to be a very long process. But this might also be one of the problems, because there is a great urgency in the chemical strategy and also in the Green Deal. It's clearly stated that new chemicals that are put in the market should be inherently safe and sustainable. So this is clearly something that is needed, and we see that all the effects of chemical pollution, like 10% of all insect species die out every decade. Since the 60s, we have a drop in fertility in men by, the sperm count has been reduced by 50% the last 50 years. So it's clearly kind of this disastrous situation. So how much time do we got? And simply, if we want to change something, we have two options. Either we go with strict regulation and force everyone to do something in a specific way, or we create market incentives so that market actors can create a change. And as we have heard, or as you have heard during this conference, the Commission is keen not to make this a regulation. It should be a voluntary scheme, and that leaves us with market options. So I think, what really needs to happen now is to create a system that can be used throughout the market for all actors, a system that is transparent, that is available for everyone. Because what we have not seen yet is a clear, what we need to see more of at least is downstream users. And perhaps this value chain investigation is good for that, but downstream users needs to be more involved so that we can create pressure in the market to actually achieve change. Because the big risk with what is happening now is that we are bogged down into the details, that we suffer from this paralysis by analysis. And that is basically what I think might be the biggest risk to this. But maybe this comes up later in the discussion.
Yes, thank you, Henrik. And I will give the word to Victor, because you have a double profile, being in academia, research, and at the same time with applied nanoparticles, really close to the industry. And that will be an interface with all other panelists who are also in academia.
Hi, thanks. One of the things between the academia and the company is that it's difficult in academia to do anything towards safety and sustainability by design, but there is plenty of room in the company. Academia is all very well organized, and you have to buy your products to your providers of the department, and in principle, all your projects are altruistic, and you do things and you don't have so much room for action in the company. You can do a lot of things. And regarding SABYDOMA, I think it's been very interesting, the monitoring of the production of the particles in real time. Not really because we need to know how it works, because more or less we know how it works, but it's the concept of time. In nanos, extremely reactive and any other substance, so how they evolve with time. And you get much more information with time evolution than just with video, than just a picture. Or if you make a picture of the people in the room, we don't get information about them. We throw some balls and some sandwich and things, people will start interacting and doing things, and we'll get much more information. So introduction of time in the observation of the behavior of our materials, in the formation of the material. So we start with atoms, we make nanoparticles that may end up in atoms or in macroparticles. This time evolution is very important to control the impacts of what we do. That's important. Also, normally, our client, they ask for particles with a certain optical density, or in silver nanowires, certain electrical conductivity. But we introduce the membrane perturbation in the loop, so a safety concern also, which is not that for the clients directly, but as we started with NASA like over 10 years ago, I think if we are safe, it's good for our customers, because we won't go to jail, and we can provide our products for a longer time. And the products that you have, you will be sure that you can use them because they are safe, and there is no at some point that the regulation will stop your provider of materials. I think that is also important. But also I wanted to say something more higher philosophical or conceptual level. I mean, it's not that we are running out of time. I think it's too late. I think when you cut a tree and the tree falls down, the tree is still alive. That's where we are. So I mean, that we already destroyed the environment, and this will have consequences that we cannot stop. Even if we stop breathing and moving and doing nothing, the impact of human activity in the last 200 years will have still go ahead, and that we start to adapt to new situations, which are at the end beautifully described in the Tragedy of Commons in 1964, in the paper of Charles Harding. There is no technology that will save us from ourselves. I mean, it's a question of culture, of society. There is no technology, there is no magic, free, clean, infinite energy. Thermodynamics doesn't allow that. Not in this universe. In some invented universe, you can get I don't know, princess and unicorns and dragonflies. But it's our problem. Technically, we can do plenty of things, but it's cultural and societal.
Thank you, Victor. And I will give the floor to Dennis, because you also being really in fundamental research. How do you see the implementation of recommendation? What have you noticed or not noticed?
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say it's a great way to pass the baton to me, because my universe is one of princesses and the unicorns. I have a 9-year-old daughter, so I'm very much into fairy tale. Thanks. Secondly, I'd like to really congratulate SABYDOMA first, of course, for the invitation, but not for the invitation. Actually, it's because what you just described earlier is fundamental for indeed promoting the field and bringing about the change that is required, because as was said, we're already late. So the legal and regulatory aspects are very, very important, rather the legal and philosophical. So again, congrats to Professor Roundtable for the actual concept and the idea. Congrats to you for implementation. That is very important. Now, in terms of what has happened in the last year and a half, clearly the CSS, the Strategy for Sustainability in Chemicals, has provided input to SSbD. The JRC work and the overall the European Commission work has been fundamental in terms of shaping what the concept is. And of course, initiatives like PARC and like IRIS, but also all the other new projects that are coming up will become fundamental in expanding from the nano world to the wider chemical world and learning from each other. So one good thing is that now we are creating a community, and suddenly and very fast, and we can really learn from each other. That's fundamental. Secondly, we have these initiatives like the ones we discussed about yesterday, trying to pull in information as opposed to sort of develop individuals to sort of really try to bring in people around, not just the table, but actually around a functional way of doing things, and thus sort of lowering the threshold to enter for companies to enter the field. Because I think what is important is indeed what was said, especially if you go with soft regulation, soft law, so more market-based instruments. It is important that the threshold for entering be as low as possible. So there, standardization, standardization methodology, but also standardization indeed is key. Guidance is key. Availability of tools that can provide easy solutions. Again, the tools have to be, simplex, as I said yesterday. So both embrace the complexity of the process and be able to address the challenges, but at the same time become simple to use. And that requires some level of integration and standardization. So there lies a real challenge as well for all of us. It will not happen by one organization or one initiative. It will happen. It will only happen if the community does it together. I really firmly believe that. This is more or less also how we went about from the situation before REACH, and I have to go back to the question of history in a way, because when the white paper on chemical safety was written in the year 2000, we had, at that time, I was responsible for the European Chemicals Bureau, and we had just done risk assessment reports of 141 chemicals. And now, of course, we have registrations for everything, almost everything that's in the market. So, and of course, assessments and a lot of changes. So there's a lot of work that has happened in between, but the shift in the thinking actually was implemented once the community was there. I think, and so that's but the example I'm drawing for from the REACH case in order to move to the SSbD. So again, the last point I'd like to say is that it is very important to create a new quote unquote business model in a way for innovation in the chemicals in the chemical field and nano, in the sense that we need to also engage financial institutions, allow them to understand, as we said yesterday about the European Investment Bank, that there may be a lot of good interest for in terms of society and for private, business profit to actually, embrace SSbD as a philosophy for development, and thus for getting the funding to the financing to go into this kind of innovation. Again, that is crucial because if we can do that, then we create a market. Market instruments work once you do have a market for them to work, and it's not, and you don't have to have the market, you have to create it. Let's just think about smartphones. It was a new market that was created. But indeed, it was a community that created that made it come true. So the question of financing, the question of standardization is important. The question of creating the societal, and when I say societal, is on one hand from consumers, but also from and the civil society at large, but also from our society, the community that we're talking about. The impetus to work to move forward is what is needed right now. And we are indeed late, but we also have to be, one thing that I'm concerned about the lateness is the fact that, we're talking about NAMs, for instance, and NAMs have been in discussion, are being developed for a number of years. In reality, right now, in regulatory regimes like REACH, they are not fully accepted, okay? Let's be honest. But they don't have to be fully accepted. That's what we need to understand to come into an SSbD framework. What pharmaceuticals are doing, and here that's a good lesson to learn. They don't, as it was said, it's better to be 80% right fast and than 100% late. and this is the innovation game. So it's not about being absolutely precise. So questions like validation and OECD formal validation is not, I think, fully pertinent in this context. It's pertinent overall, but not for the innovation side. So we need to be careful about how we shape the fast pace in terms of looking at bringing these different technologies.
Thank you, and I will give the word to Evan, because of course, you are involved in different projects also. And so, what have you noticed during this year and a half since the recommendation?
Yeah,
Actually, I would like to just bring the attention back to SABYDOMA as a starting point for also other projects, because, and I would second or even third what Andrew and others in fact said about the technologies being relevant, highly relevant to SSbD, and I think. And in fact, in the landscape you so beautifully described to us earlier this morning, Anthony, this soft regulation landscape, having technologies that facilitate this understanding early is an inspirational approach that SABYDOMA took, and I think it was perhaps the only project of this grouping to start from the technologies. And I think what taught us, not just providing the tools, the live feed of a production line where you're tuning your particle size and you can see live whether that's more toxic, that's less toxic, that's more reactive. That is a paradigm then to drive into other newer projects as they begin to try and bring that interface of enabling soft regulation to support the whole system and to provide solutions, technical solutions to the understanding of, is it toxic? How toxic is it? When will it cause trouble to the workers, or later on to people using the materials and technologies? So I think, to me, the inspiration I'm getting from SABYDOMA is, yes, you can do it on the production line, and of course safe by design, and safe and sustainable even more difficult to address by design. You have to go even further back. Maybe we were talking yesterday about the ideation phase. Can we go that far back? But that's to me, that is the drive for bringing even more newer, different technologies that will allow us to innovate, exactly because we don't have to be forced to either do it at the start or not do it at all, but actually see how far back in the technology development, or in the TRL development even, excuse me, space to find solutions that would give us live answers. And I mentioned TRL, and that reminded me one of my other, I'll just go back to your very first question, Anthony, very briefly, to say that one of my other favorite great things from SABYDOMA was the idea of mixing TRL technology readiness level with SSbD readiness level, and I think that's something that SABYDOMA started. Maria did a great job to actually and the whole amazing SABYDOMA crowd, but it was I think a clever concept. That's another thing that I would like to see newer projects pushing forward and making it an application, because I think that's now on the SSbD stage where we are, on the SSbD development stage where we are. We need to develop the examples, the case studies, and that's where I think we need to go with the new projects. It's just to go back to your question. I hope I answered it.
Yes, thank you, Eva. And I will turn before turning to Hubert, because I didn't want to spoil the answer to that question, because Hubert, of course, is on the side of, I would say, the initiative of this recommendation. But I will turn to Sean on the side of the NIA, not as a partner of the project, but as you write it on your LinkedIn profile, a voice for the industry. What has been basically, what did you notice at the industry level? Because you have a lot of industry players around you.
Where to begin? Unlike you, my daughter is now a teenager, so my belief in fairies and unicorns has disappeared into the reality of she now has her first boyfriend. Yeah. Well, what do you do with a teenager? Teenagers are confusing. They have very confusing viewpoints, that change their viewpoints regularly. You have to be clear. You have to have one clear voice. The challenge I see at the minute with SSbD is that that's not quite what we're getting. We're getting, sometimes from an industry perspective, slightly confusing messages. When Safe by Design sort of first was being discussed in NanoReg and NanoReg 2, it was clearly the idea that you would be able to achieve regulatory compliance by investing earlier stage in Safe by Design, and therefore you'd make your regulatory journey easier. Over time, I'm beginning to think that maybe we're not there yet, and I'm not sure we will be there in the immediate future. However, I agree with you, 80% right and fast for innovation is good. And so I wonder whether we need to now start really, we've got more clarity on the regulation. We know what we need to be done. I would certainly recommend, if people haven't looked at it, the Malta Initiative priority list that's just been released this week. It really clearly states what test guidelines we need for regulatory compliance. That's great, that's positive, that's very something that's clear. I think with Safe by Design, what we need is we need to focus on the innovation aspect and really understand that what we're asking companies to do, it's a cultural change. And that means you can't do culture change quickly. You can't go into a company and expect them to turn around very quickly and change their practices and change their behaviour. So we have to make it appealing for industry. We have to bring on large industry, small industry. They have different drivers, they have different needs, they have different demands. We have to be clear on what we're expecting them to do. We have to have clear tools for them to be able to use. We have to create that market opportunity for them to understand what needs to be achieved in the innovation phase. And I think with Safe by Design, looking at it from the innovation point of view, is probably where Safe by Design should get that right and not worry about trying to do the whole journey from innovation to regulation. Just let's get each step right, and then in the future we can go back to thinking about unicorns and fairies and try and get it all to work nicely together.
Yes, and then just to finalize the discussion on this question, because we still have a few other questions, I will give the floor to Hubert, because of course I didn't want to spoil that you would give an answer saying, well, the implementation with this. So maybe now we will learn more what you have seen, because you have been really at the heart of this recommendation adoption.
Yes, so when you ask about the progress I have seen in the last 1.5 years, that means roughly since the recommendation was adopted, more or less. On the one hand, I'm pleasantly surprised, and on the other hand, I'm not surprised in another aspect. And to explain this now. So when the recommendation was adopted, a very short time after that, there was a call for stakeholder feedback to use this recommendation to give feedback. And I was really pleasantly surprised about those respondents that really fearlessly jumped into cold water, because with very little time for preparation for integrating this new concept and let's say taking it to the heart and trying to give a feedback. So this really was a very pleasant surprise, and it helped a lot in the further development. Second, also, there are these projects, European projects, NMBP 15, that started out on SBD. So when SSbD was not known, and they adopted that very quickly during the runtime of their project by embracing also SSbD and taking it into their work, and the later projects even more. And that is also quite a good progress, I would see. Then, and of course, the new projects, they are completely focused on SSbD on certain aspects to that, and they will contribute to the implementation of the whole concept. It is important that this concept is being recognized, and it will be also important, and also with the implementation, to get a more common understanding of what it is. And I'm also I'm very pleased also to see that industry also takes up the concept. When you look at the websites, or when you talk to the representatives to the websites of industry associations, I don't tell the names, you will see the concept of SSbD being discussed there, and also embraced in a certain way. So this is going, I think, into the right direction. And then also with the legal aspects, when I was invited last year to the last legal workshop, I said, oh, now I'm getting into trouble with the lawyers, because this is a voluntary thing, and what legal aspects could there be? But I learned a lot there, and I think that it is also let's say analyzed and taken forward on with legal aspects. I think this is also a great progress, and let's face it, with the with the communication on advanced materials for industrial leadership that was introduced yesterday by Vangelis, it is clearly said that although these materials, advanced materials, should be developed, this is very important. At the heart of this development, there should be the safe, sustainable by design concept. This is clearly written in that communication, and I think that will go on. And I'm very positively looking forward how this will develop. And of course, a lot of things there are a lot of things to do, and that's why we have the follow-up projects and new projects in Horizon Europe. A lot of things are to do, but and progress is quite appreciable. And compared with the progress we had in the past with the nanomaterials, it's going much faster this time.
Thank you, Robert. And I'm turning to the next question, but very short, because we have a very tight agenda. And we'll turn to Blanca maybe, because it's about the last workshop, and we had a conclusion. Do you think that the conclusion of the last workshop in SABYDOMA is still relevant?
Yeah, I also wanted to add one more thing, because everything has been discussed, but I'm very happy to hear about standards, because for the industry, we tried to start the standard journey in 2017, and we had a very cold welcome in those days. So now I hear a lot about standardization, and just to remind you that there is a standard under development. So, and some people here are partners, so we should get back into work. Yeah, because we see now how important this is. So yeah. And another thing I want to say, that after trying to implement Safe by Design, that initially we tried to do it, like Sean mentioned, to anticipate regulatory issues in good time in a cost-efficient way. So we started with NanoReg. Maria was also there trying to adapt testing guidelines. So I see a whole process now. And we have learned how to work with sustainability people. We learned their language and they learn our language. So I think that getting the two communities together was also quite nice. I just wanted to add this. Yeah. Thank you.
And about the conclusion of the last workshop, is it still relevant?
Yeah, it is valid. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Then I will turn maybe to Anne-Chloé, because I want to have people not involved in SABYDOMA answering to that question, because we are less maybe neutral in SABYDOMA of what we have done before.
Yes, I think the exercise of defining SSbD at that time was interesting. And what we found is that we still have to get common understanding. I mean, okay, we are here a community, we are all more or less experts, but if we talk to industry, to SMEs, not at all, right? So yes, I think it's still completely relevant. It's just a question of speed, really, you know. How fast are we going to get, basically?
Okay, and Henrik, what do you think?
Well, I agree, and I think it is a matter of speed, and it's also a matter of decisiveness, I think, because somewhere down the line, someone also needs to make a decision on how to move ahead, and that is really a political issue. So I guess it's with the commission or that will have to make the decision. And I think that is also something that we would have liked to see earlier also. More decisiveness that would create greater clarity also, I think, with companies and stakeholders.
And Dennis, what do you think about it?
I actually think that the commission will, at the end of the day, set the policy framework, but in reality, it's industry which has to be convinced to change paradigm. We saw this with everything that has to do with environmental protection, even REACH, but more importantly, if we call the Montreal Protocol, this happened only when industry had alternatives to CFCs. So in reality, if we can, that's why I said it's very important to create the setting, the context, to create a new business model to make this, appetite, to open the appetite of business in the business sector to move in this direction. Once that happens, then the policy makers will follow through, and I'm sure this will happen because we need to have prepared the tools for that. But it's important to create the conditions for industry to fully embark on this trip.
Yes, thank you, Dennis. I will give the floor now to Victor for the next question. What are, in your opinion, Victor, the challenges SSbD can face in the future, except the reproduction of unicorns, of course?
That is already too late. I think, as we were discussing yesterday and these 2 days, I think that the conceptual framework for safety by design, sustainability, which is based in anticipation, what may happen, and this is based on the knowledge of your system and the potential consequence of what you have to do. I think this is already settled more or less and well described. I think we will need to have examples. And I think that what would be good for safety by design is these examples, the model cases are appealing in all the aspects. I don't know, in Applied, one of our products were iron oxide nanoparticles. We reach production in 500 liter cubes. That's large volume, and the problem is that we just make 16 kilograms, that's 500 kilos, more, and then you have more than 500 kilos, you get 16, and mainly basic waters. In the lab, a little bit of basic water is not a problem. In industry, start being a problem. So at some point we decide, well, we have to put this again back, so we recirculate the waste, and then we get a lower, it's not molecule water at the beginning, there is some ions and pollution. The pollution gets into the product, and it's not a problem, it's a product for chemical industry and waste management, so that was not a problem. If you recirculate all the time, at the end you increase the ions concentration, salt, that at some point you can put it to the sun to evaporate in the water, and then you will get the salt, and the salt is sodium chloride, which is already in the planet like that. So that was saving us money just by introducing a few chemical strategies to recover and control your waste. And think that not treating for 500 liters of very basic water was very cheap. Indeed, at the end, the process in the industrial production, the most expensive step was not the production of the materials, was to deal with the waste. And then that was not so difficult to reintroduce the waste as a reagent. And I mean, if you go medical and impurities has to be below 9, then maybe you cannot recirculate, but then you can use that to recirculate to other lower tech or not so high requirements like in medicine. So I think this type of action is more or less what has been described in SABYDOMA and other projects. And I think that now that we have the tool, we should start using the tool to refine it and to get examples that you show if you are sustainable, you may be even profitable. And also for your customers and in society, you will maybe well accepted, you can protect your market. So there may be interesting things that you get benefits from being responsible.
And thank you, Victor. And because we, of course, running out of time with such an interesting panel, to answer to that question, I will give the floor to Andrew, because he has been at the forefront of setting up this SABYDOMA project. So what do you think the future challenges remain?
Okay. I think the future challenges partly political, actually. I mean, we discuss this all the time at home, and they're really the communication of scientists to the public. And I'm sorry to get into this realm, but I was asked this question. I think you can't do anything unless the public accept it. And I follow on a lot from what Victor was saying. And I think that there are so many issues in public health. And I talked about this the other day in the panel. And it just takes years and years and years for the public to accept it. And the examples of smoking and lead in petrol and certain pharmaceuticals and pesticides, before they were actually banned or before there was any control, was sometimes up to 50 or 60 years. And this was partly because of, mainly because of the education of the public to the dangers. And it just took years and years and years. And we live at a time now when it's still happening, that there's still arguments. And I follow on again from Victor. We've proved that climate change is associated with carbon dioxide production from industry. But there's still a vast number of people, and I know this because I hear the arguments in the UK. There are vast numbers of people that still don't believe it. So I think the main challenge, and I'm afraid of it, this is a disruptive statement, but the main challenge is in dissemination. As I said earlier, 2 days earlier, is dissemination and argument and discussion with the public and workshops with the public to attempt to explain the dangers of what's happening, because if the public accept it, don't accept it, the politicians never will. And you need a public perception to change the political psyche. So I think the main challenge in the future, apart from the other challenges like improvement of technology, development of technology, is actually making the public aware, because you can't develop the technology unless the public want it for it. And the biggest example is the computer, which is, I've had the fortunate experience of seeing computer developed from the size of this room in the 1960s. We used to use a computer the size of this room to do now what a smartphone does. And it's because the public wanted it. The public wanted a computer. I also know as a core electrochemist how in the last 40 years batteries have developed from the old heavy lead acid accumulator to the modern battery that drives electric cars. It's such an enormous development. Why? Because people realize that we need to change from the internal combustion engine to electric cars, and therefore companies developed to produce this. So I think to develop the technology and to make technology safer, we need a public awareness, and public awareness comes from dissemination and education. So that's my passionate play. You asked me, you received the reply.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And I think we can make a better use of the coffee break, because we have so many panelists who can answer to so many different questions that I think it's better to move forward and to ask questions during the coffee break, because we have a tight schedule today. Projects have meetings also this afternoon. We have another workshop after, starting at 11. Some of you have to take flights or trains. So I suggest that the questions will be asked directly during the coffee break. I assume that all the panelists agree to that between two coffees to answer to some of your questions. We have really been thankful to the panelists for being available this morning and be available also in the next minutes to answer to you all your questions. Thank you very much to the panelists. And basically, this is really the end of the workshop. It was a great pleasure to have such a big audience on the last day of, I would say, quite a busy week, because we have had a lot of speeches this week at Antos. This is really like a satellite meeting, but indeed it's a very big pleasure for all the SABYDOMA project to see such a full room on a Thursday morning, maybe before you take a flight or you just board on your train. But thank you very much. Thank you very much for also having followed all the developments in our project. You know, we have very active social media, thanks to also Beatrice. So follow, of course, the LinkedIn account, the website, because of course, the further news will be posted there. And of course, please do not hesitate to liaise with one of the partners of this consortium. We will be happy to follow up on any topic for discussion. And please now enjoy the coffee break, which will be well deserved for the panelists who have been really answering to quite challenging questions on the spot. Thank you very much. We will do a picture for the panelists.
We have to start an education tax on.